So the global attention is focused on Ukraine right now on the back of Russia's aggression, costing lives, damaging the economy, and sending millions away as refugees, and casting a very big shadow on the rest of the world. A few days into the second month of the Russian military operations in Ukraine, billions of dollars are pouring into the European country to support the emerging human and material crisis. Joining me to discuss the conversation around Ukraine's war at the ongoing World Bank, IMF spring meetings, and outlook on Africa, which has its own set of problems, is Agnes Gital, Managing Partner at GBS Africa. She's speaking to us tonight out of London. Good to see you again, Madam. Thanks for coming through.
My pleasure, Boston. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. Now, the war in Ukraine is dominating the discourse at the World Bank and the IMF spring meetings. What are your thoughts around how this crisis is being handled by global policymakers right now?
My thoughts are we shouldn't forget the ongoing crisis elsewhere in the continent, particularly where you and I come from, West Africa, the Sahel, eastern part of African region. So the way the world has responded to the crisis in Ukraine, my thought is because the Ukrainian government has been very vocal in calling everyone to support them, including the African Union. So the response, the positive response we're seeing in terms of support, financial and military, is just because of the way Ukraine has rallied the whole international community to support them.
I got it, because again, if you look at the crisis around the Sahel region, I'm sure you're from Kenya, you look at the Sudan, South Sudan, you look at Somalia, the crisis in that Horn of Africa, including Ethiopia. Then you look at Nigeria, northern part of the country, you look at Mali, Chad, and part of Cameroon to the north and all of that. You look at the crisis of the Sahel, the ISWAP, and what have you. We don't seem to get as much support, as it were, an outcry as Ukraine is getting. Is it because there's a big brother here, Russia on one hand? Was it because of the military aggression? Do you think we're getting the same attention, by the way?
Firstly, Boston, we shouldn't have a crisis in the region. We should be responding ourselves and trying to resolve the crisis in our back door, right? But the response, as I said, is purely because the Ukrainian, a country most of us really did not know about. Most Africans know about until 2 months ago when Russia invaded them. The response from the world community is because most of these Ukrainians look like them. Perhaps the African continent, we are constantly at war. So it has almost become normalized that the rest of the world thinks it's normal for Africa to be warring against each other. It is normal for them to constantly have social unrest. But because this is unusual, it's at their back door. They have to respond, and obviously it has a direct adverse impact on the European and the advanced economies.
Do you think in what areas do you think Africa will need more global funding support and the world to put their boots on the ground, in a manner of speaking, to really support the continent right now? The same way the Bretton Woods institutions are breasting the tape and they're pouring, Washington is making announcements of billions of dollars, everyone is putting something on the table. We've had refugee crisis in Africa. A lot of young folks are crossing the Mediterranean and sinking into the sea almost on a daily, weekly basis. So we've got a crisis here. Like you said, perhaps it's become normalized that nobody really cares so much anymore.
Boston, I ask you again, we should be sorting out the challenges in our back door without really looking out to everybody. But it's a clear sign that we have to deal with these issues on our own directly. The response, particularly on the refugee, 10 million Ukrainians have fled since the war began, just in 2 months, right? We've seen open door policy from every border. And as you rightly say, these people are constantly closing the borders to fleeing Africans or people from Asia or Middle East, but they have been, they have completely changed. I do hope the way forward is that whenever someone is in trouble, that we all open doors and we all, do whatever we can to support them. But what should we do, particularly, as you know very well, Boston, that the crisis in Ukraine and Russia has also impacted the continent. We are very dependent on commodities. At least 10 of Africa's biggest economies import from Russia, including your country, Nigeria, mine, Kenya, Egypt. These countries, these are the big economies. They control at least 2/3 of Africa's GDP. So with the disruption of the supply chain, what does that mean? It means obviously we'll struggle with rising prices, rising inflation, commodity crisis. As you know, Russia and Ukraine are key suppliers for gas. So what should we do? What we should do is promote more production in the continent. The energy crisis position the continent in a position whereby we can start looking at green energy, the hydro sector, as well as wind energy, right? But this of a dependence on the international trade routes, I think teaches us a lesson that when do we start looking at home and finding solutions at home?
You're finding solutions at home. Do you think the Bretton Woods institutions, the big economic capitals of the world, do they really think Africa is important in terms of global geopolitics, in the real sense of it? We
are only important when it serves. And I repeat what the SG of the World Health Organization in a statement earlier said, that the world needs to respond to the crisis everywhere, crisis, the same way they have responded to Ukraine. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm not saying that we shouldn't open our doors and extend a helping hand to Ukraine. And I think African countries should do the same, right? But to respond to your question, Boston, we are only important to this institution when it serves their purpose, right? So again, what is the way forward? The way forward for the African continent, to improve our social network, to ensure that the vulnerable people are looked after, to ensure that we are tackling issues of insecurity, we are tackling issues of corruption, and also that we are looking for ways, diversifying our economies, right? I keep saying diversifying our economy, more production. This is a moment where government should be coming up with intervention to try and make sure that we have more production, but particularly for maize and corn and grain, which most countries depend or import from Russia and Ukraine.
Agnes Jutal, international relations expert and managing partner at GBS Africa out of London. Thank you very much. We appreciate your analysis on the show tonight, as always.